Throughout Throne FC's lifespan, I've covered several national teams that have experienced heartbreaking moments in their history. Some bottled many finals, while others squandered golden opportunities to achieve something significant for their country. But I don't think I've ever covered a football nation as unlucky and depressing as Scotland. In this video, I'm going to prove once and for all why they're the most cursed, yet also the luckiest national team in the world. It might not make much sense now, but I guarantee that if you stay until the end, you'll gain a newfound appreciation for Scotland and might even start rooting for them. But first, let me give you some context. Alongside England, Scotland is the oldest national team in the world, having played the first international match in 1872. From that period until 1904, historians consider Scotland the best national team in that era due to their impressive record of only 2 defeats in their first 43 international matches, and because it took them more than 30 years to finally be beaten by a team other than England. In the 20th century, Scotland lost ground as many national teams improved and surpassed them, but that doesn't mean they fell into oblivion. In the 1970s and 80s, Scotland boasted several world-class players such as Graham Souness, Kenny Dalglish and Joe Jordan, which created a sense of euphoria in the country. That feeling would turn into a nationwide hype for the 1978 World Cup after their manager Ali MacLeod said they had genuine chances of coming home with a medal. But of course, that never happened and Scotland returned home right after the tournament's first group stage. It's baffling how Scotland consistently qualified for international tournaments from the 1970s until the late 90s, but failed to progress past the group stage on every single occasion. I mean, do you know of any other nation that went through something similar? At least when it comes to European nations, if they're somewhat decent and have participated in a handful of international tournaments, they're bound to have at least one decent run. Poland in the 1982 World Cup, Switzerland in the last Euros, Ukraine in the 2006 World Cup, the list goes on and on. But Scotland has nothing. Nothing but meaningless cups from the 19th century and the honor of their players being part of the best European teams during the 1970s up until the end of the 20th century. Then with the globalization of the Premier League, Scottish players started to be overlooked by the biggest clubs in favor of other international players. Of course, you'd still find 1 or 2 players in the best clubs in the world, but it was becoming apparent that the average Scottish national team player was now plying its trade in weaker Premier League teams, Championship sides, and Scotland's Premiership. That downgrade in competitiveness was certainly one of the biggest causes of their football downfall, if we can even call it a downfall. But since they haven't won a match in an international tournament since 1996 and have only qualified for 2 tournaments in this century, I think it's fair to call it a downfall, even though they never made it past the group stage during their supposed golden years. It was also during this downfall that Scotland's poor luck reached an all-time high. During the Euro 2008 qualifying stage, Scotland got off to a great start. They beat France both home and away, and with just 2 matches left to play, Scotland was set to shock the world and qualify ahead of the previous World Cup finalists, Italy and France. However, they lost against Georgia, the second worst team in the group, before losing to Italy to seal their elimination right at the finish line. 4 years later, Scotland was once again trying to qualify for the Euros. This time, they fell just 2 points short of reaching the playoffs. And do you know why? Because their manager Craig Levein decided to deploy his players in a 4-6-0 formation against the Czech Republic, one of the most outrageous tactics in modern history, with the excuse that he saw fucking Rubin Kazan win a match against Barcelona with that tactic. First of all, the Czech Republic in 2010 was not prime Barcelona. They weren't even half as good as they were during the early 2000s. They were a bang average team that Scotland should have tried to face head on. And the worst part of it all, even though they went out with the most boring terrorist ball approach, they still lost. Then in 2015, 8 years after the horror match against Georgia, Scotland would have their chance to avenge that loss and qualify for the expanded Euro Championship. Surely this time they would qualify, right? Nope, they lost again to the same nation and ended up 3 points behind 3rd place Ireland. Given that they had beaten Ireland head-to-head, a win over Georgia would have most likely guaranteed their presence in the 2016 edition, but once again, they bottle it. However, just 1 season later, a beacon of hope was coming to life in Scotland's Premiership. Kilmarnock was sitting at the bottom of the table until Steve Clarke, a former Premier League manager and an avid supporter of the club, took over and saved them. In his first 2 matches in charge, Clarke took the relegation-bound squad and drew against Rangers and Celtic. Those inspiring games breathed some much needed life into the squad, and by the end of the season, Kilmarnock was much closer to European qualification than to relegation. 1 year later, Clark would achieve the unthinkable. He led Kilmarnock to Europe after reaching a historic 3rd place and broke the club's record for league points for the 2nd consecutive season. All of Scotland fell in love with him. He had the aura and the expected pedigree to achieve something remarkable with the eternal underdogs. And surprisingly, this time it wasn't just a false sense of hope. Scotland did qualify for Euro 2020. As you're probably aware, they still failed to make it past the group stage, but there was a clear sense of purpose in that team. There was unity, and several Scottish players were once again playing pivotal roles in many Premier League teams. Furthermore, there is simply no better way to paint a revolution than to look at the UEFA Nations League record. Scotland began their journey in the 3rd tier and climbed their way to League A, currently standing above several notable nations like Turkey, Sweden and England. After Euro 2020 until late 2023, Scotland was actually pretty good, or at least that's what their record showed. They won the vast majority of their matches, defeating teams like Denmark, Ukraine, Norway and Spain. But after a convincing defeat in a friendly against England, Scotland magically went back to their mediocre selves. In the following 13 matches that took place over the last 365 days, Scotland has only been able to win one of them, against arguably the worst national team in Europe at the moment, Gibraltar. Along the way, they finished dead last in the Euro 2024 group, achieving the unlikely feat of not qualifying for the knockouts for the 2nd time in a row in a tournament where 2/3 of the present nations make it to the round of 16. If that wasn't enough, they were also eliminated from the Euros with a late stoppage time goal by Hungary, and their first 2 matches in this season's Nations League have all ended in the same heartbreaking fashion. After hearing me yap for however long this video is at the moment, if you still believe they aren't the most cursed national team in the world, then I don't know what else I can say. Either way, like I mentioned in the beginning, the results on the pitch have certainly justified their position as a cursed nation. But on the other hand, how can a team be cursed when they have the most loyal supporters behind them? The Tartan army really impressed me during the last few matches that I was able to watch. Even when Germany was toying with their players, the Scottish supporters were singing their praise and encouraging the squad to never give up, even though the match was clearly lost. Most recently against Portugal, even after bottling the match in the last few minutes, the Tartan army stood tall and continued to shout well beyond the final whistle. No matter what, they'll always be there. I could go my entire lifetime without seeing Scotland play a knockout match, but I know for sure that their fans will never turn their back on them. That's something that I, as a Portuguese fan, can't say the same about our group of supporters. Sure, Scotland might always flop when it matters the most, and Scottish fans will ultimately have to go through their entire lives knowing that they're in the shadow of their fiercest rival. They might be their national team's harshest critics, but they're also the most loyal group of fans you'll probably find in all of international football. So at the end of the day, is Scotland really that unlucky? Let me know your opinion in the comments, as I always read every single feedback that you leave in my videos. Drop a like to push this content to more people, and subscribe to Throne FC so you never miss the best football videos on YouTube. As always, thanks for watching until the end, I appreciate your support, and I will see you in the next one.